about Sam Darnold before we go to break is his best weapon that he's got in Carolina also happens to be a weapon that he is very familiar and comfortable with from the Jets in Robbie Anderson.
Yeah. That was a smart move. You know what? The more we talk about it, it's hard to hate what the Panthers organization has been doing this entire offseason.
I just hope they give him the trust to throw it deep, because Gase never gave him that trust. He was pretty much told to never throw it deep, and what a waste of him and Robbie Anderson at the same time.
Yeah,
I agree.
The Panthers correct that.
You want him to be confident. First game, you're like, dude, throw it long. First play, we don't care.
Mm-hmm. What's the worst thing that happens? He throws an interception. Well, I mean, I know that this is a different player, but when people talk about interceptions and a quarterback throwing a lot, it's like, well, Brett Favre threw the most in NFL history. Dude's in the Hall of Fame, so calm down with that. Interceptions are part of the game. It's going to happen when you have a gunslinger. They just chuck it. That's what they do. Tony Romo, same way. You're going to see a lot of quarterbacks who threw a lot of interceptions are really good quarterbacks, and you can't. I don't think you should really use that as a barometer, especially when. Let's look at Daniel Jones. How many interceptions did he have that came off of Evan Ingram's hands or off of Sterling Shepard's hands? Eli Manning had a game with 4 interceptions, and literally all 4 interceptions came off of a wide receiver's hands that they just didn't catch the ball. Interceptions are part of the game. Relax. It's going to happen. The good quarterbacks can get through it. I think you just need to allow the quarterback to make mistakes and learn from them, and I don't think there was any learning going on in New York.
The guy that's happiest, if he had actually heard you say this, which I'm sure he didn't, would be Jameis Winston.
No, Jameis Winston is he's a different kind of animal, so I'm not even going to talk about him.
He said he was one of the best quarterbacks when he went 32-32.
I mean, in all fairness, it should have been 40 and 32, because at least 8 of them were returned for touchdowns. So...
Well, yeah, but I don't think they count those.
They should. Anyways, we're gonna go to break, and on the flip side, we're gonna talk about the Saints, the Buccaneers, and we're gonna end it with our This Week in Sports History. You're listening to Dan D'Antoni Sports. And we are back. Thank you for holding with us. You are still listening to Dan D'Antoni Sports. The first half of the show, we talked about the Knicks and their woes, but then we got into the main point of the episode, and that was we talked about the Falcons, we talked about the Panthers. We're going to finish up the show now, like I said, before the break, with the Saints, the Buccaneers, and end it with our This Week in Sports History. So, gentlemen, the New Orleans Saints. Remember last year when we were talking about draft, how I said the hardest team to draft for is going to be the Baltimore Ravens because they're good at both offense and defense. What glaring needs do they have? That's how I felt about the Saints, especially knowing that they're not going to draft a quarterback to replace Drew Brees because they got both Jameis and Taysom Hill, and for some reason they're confident with both. So we knew a quarterback was not in the cards. So what the hell do they do? And so they started by drafting defensive end Peyton Turner. Their second pick, they went linebacker Pete Werner. So they drafted Turner Werner. Their third pick was Paulson Adebo, a corner from Stanford. Their fourth pick, and here's where I was a little surprised, but this is the point where, quarterbacks kind of become irrelevant in the draft. You have a few steals. You get your Russell Wilsons, who was a third-round pick, your Kirk Cousins, who was a fourth, your Dak Prescott, who was a fourth. So these quarterbacks can come in and make a difference, but a lot of times they're going to end up being career backups. They draft Ian Book, the Notre Dame quarterback. Then they draft offensive tackle Landon Young. They drafted in the 7th round wide receiver Kawan Baker. So that's 6 draft picks. And I'm going to be honest with you, I really don't like a single one. I feel like Peyton Turner, okay, solid defensive end, but guess what? Gregory Rousseau was still on the board, and he's a fucking monster. He is what children check in their closets and under their bed for, because he is huge, he is scary, and he's going to fuck shit up in the NFL. The Bills, killer draft just by drafting Greg Rousseau, who was the catalyst for an insanely talented Miami defense. And they passed on him to draft Peyton Turner. Not that Houston's bad.
That pick. He's athletic. Had decent stats for various speeds and things like that, but technique-wise, he's lacking. As you said, Rousseau was on the board, so were a bunch of other players that would have been a better pick than Turner. He was, I don't even think he was projected to go in the second. I wouldn't have wanted him in the second. I think he's a third-round pick at best, and they grabbed him toward the end of the first, which is just, crazy.
Mm-hmm. And then,
yeah, to be honest, that's the pick I don't like the most as well, just for literally pretty much everything that was just said. That being said, again, a hometown bias here is a little part of it. I don't mind Werner in the second because you definitely want a solid linebacker who can chase people down. And the thing that makes me like it is we've seen it in past history that the Saints get the most out of Ohio State players.
The New Orleans Buckeyes?
Huh?
The New Orleans Buckeyes? Eli Apple?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, no, they actually made Eli Apple not terrible because he had Malcolm Jenkins to yell at him the whole time.
Marshawn Lattimore?
Sorry, not Jenkins. Lattimore.
Yeah.
Lattimore was yelling at him the whole time, and he had to listen to him because that's what he did in college. Just don't make it too complicated for the kid. But,
yeah.
I mean, Michael Thomas, they've done this for a while with getting Ohio State players and making them work. But the first-round pick there, again, like Shay was saying, people did not have him on the board, and a lot of people that were focusing on the NFC East and just on the draft in general were like, I don't understand what they're doing here. I mean, it was kind of baffling, almost as baffling as when the Raiders traded up to get somebody that could have clearly fell to them way later.
Yeah, it just the only two picks that I don't hate, not saying I like them, especially because I think that there were better linebackers who were drafted after Werner. Not to be a Cowboys homer, but I think Jabril Cox is also a steal of the draft. And I said this last 2 weeks ago. I feel like Jabril Cox makes more sense to have been drafted first, second round than 4th round where they got him. But I don't hate the Werner pick. I also don't hate...
one of the few you can't hate. Everything else is not good here.
I mean, I don't hate Ian Book either because I feel like, again, it's a 4th round quarterback. Chances are he's going to be a career backup. But we've seen 4th rounders end up working out. I don't think Ian Book is a bad quarterback. So I don't hate the pick. I don't like it, but I don't hate it. Everything else I hate. I think it's all terrible. The rest of the draft.
The Ian Book to me is one of the worst picks, and it's only it's a double-edged sword to me because it can either be a terrible pick because what you're running down there does not fit what Ian Book does. Like what you're going to be having Winston and Taysom Hill do is not where Book excels. It's not where he'd be best suited. But are you not worried about that? Are you like, listen, this is their program. We're going to teach you something else so that 4 years down the line you can use it?
Well, I think Ian Book actually makes a lot more sense than a lot of people do. What was it that beat Michigan? It was him extending plays with his legs. It was him getting out of the pocket, him running, and that's how Notre Dame was able to beat Michigan. And that's not too far off from the system that they're going to run with Jameis. Jameis isn't a quarterback like Deshaun Watson or Lamar who, once they get out the pocket and on the sidelines, is going to race you to the end zone. He's a guy that's going to try and get out and then still throw the ball. And I think Ian Book is actually similar enough to where they only need to make minor tweaks if he ends up being the guy.
I guess
I don't love the Ian Book choice. I don't hate it. I actually do like the Adebo pick. You know, he was hurt and then he opted out, but he was supposed to be a really good cornerback prospect. So that is like the one positive I give them. I don't like Turner. Werner, I think, was still a reach. He's not a terrible pick, but definitely a reach. Landon Young doesn't look like he's anything more than rotational at best. I guess what was that later pick they had? Meaners. He looks like he, it could potentially be decent, but other than that, it's just not a good draft. You got a ton of needs. You've entered, rebuild, whether you want to admit it or not, with the retirement of Breeze, and with your cap situation, you need a full rebuild, and none of these guys really seem like they're going to contribute to that. It's just I don't know. It's pretty wild to me that those were the choices they went with. They didn't make any real moves in the draft.
That's where my.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Please finish up.
I was just going to say they're sticking with Hill and Winston, who I guess are serviceable, but I don't know. I feel like they could have done some significant things differently.
Yeah, I very much agree, and that's why I felt the Saints were the hardest team to draft for. Because what do they need? Well, a little bit of everything. Like, there's no glaring biggest need. Like, with the Cowboys, the biggest need was obviously secondary. They didn't do it properly, but with the Raiders, the biggest need is offensive line. So, like, there are glaring needs that teams need. Problem is the Saints have too many, and where do you start? That's why if I were drafting, I don't know that I'd go DN for them. I think that maybe I would go for one of the offensive linemen. And if I'm going DN, I'm not going Peyton Turner. I'm going Gregory fucking Rousseau. So there's just too much that the Saints needed for me to be confident in trying to guess what they were going to get. But I never would have guessed in a million years it'd be Peyton Turner with their first round pick.
They definitely made some, at best, questionable choices. I guess we're going to have to evaluate this years down the line to determine how terrible this was, but there were a lot of head scratchers, and just where and why are you selecting that? Like, do you not know the team needs, or you just don't care?